What up, bro? Welcome back to Menprovement Podcast. It's been quite a while, but I'm back. And in this episode, I'm going to speak with Dain Heer. And we're going to talk about this whole concept of perfectionism and how it can hinder your growth and your life. And it definitely did hinder mine, and it still in some way, shape, or form does. An example of that is that I was recording this intro 3 times because I felt it's not good enough. Anyway, so we're going to talk about perfectionism in different areas of your life, be it creating something, relationships, work. So if you feel like perfectionism is stopping you from being the man that you want to be, I know how cliche that sounds, but that's basically what happens. We stop ourselves from taking action because we want it to be amazing instead of putting it out there. So I can only imagine how many great works of art or all sorts of creations have been stopped because of this insidious tendency. Well, without further ado and without much editing, I'm just gonna jump into the podcast. I'll see you on the other side. This is Dain Heer. Okay, so basically, as you said, the drive to make things perfect on the surface looks like a good thing because you're basically trying to do as good of a job as you are capable of doing, right? So it seems like a good drive to have.
It sounds like a good idea. But as a wise man once said, it's like walking toward the horizon.
Right, yeah.
Because the thing is, unfortunately, you can never get there. But what the whole idea of what perfect really is a perfect set of judgments that limit you more dynamically than anything else. And, like we've already talked about, you can't actually ever become perfect. You could realize you're perfect exactly as you are, but nobody wants to know that. Or, that you're great exactly as you are. My point of view is rather than strive for perfection, go for greatness and go for the greatness that you actually are, that you can achieve. And for me, I had a chiropractic practice. I was opening my second practice. I was living in Santa Barbara, California, which is like friggin' paradise. Or at least I thought so at the time. And, I was dying inside because all of my dreams of perfection were falling apart around me. My relationship wasn't what I thought it was. I thought I had found the perfect girl that I was going to marry. She didn't really like me. It turned out, what a surprise. I wanted to be perfect in helping people. I was, chiropractor and I wanted to be perfect in healing people. I couldn't do that. The money that I decided, I had all these visions for what my perfect future was going to be, and none of it was showing up. And I got to a place where I was like, I'm done. I'm out of here. Universe, you got 6 months. Either my life really changes or I'm killing myself. I'm done.
You gave the universe the ultimatum.
Exactly. And, and really I was giving myself the ultimatum without realizing it, because it's one thing to demand of the universe and it's another thing to demand of yourself. If you demand of yourself, that you can actualize, that you can make happen. When you can also, though, be supported by the universe, whatever that is from you, but you have to be the one to make the demand of you and the one to choose, which is what I actually did.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, can I ask for specific example? So let's say, what was the vision of the relationship and what was the actuality? What was the vision of the career and what was the actuality? And was it actually that bad? Or was it just bad in a relation of that vision? But if you took a look through a different lens, it was actually okay.
Well, I like all those questions because it gets you to all look from a different place. But the vision that I had for the relationship was somebody who cared for me deeply, who was there for me, somebody who I could look after, somebody who would receive from me, somebody where we had great sex and had each other's backs, and somebody where if we got married, we would care for each other forever. And, and then after that, have the cutest little kids on the planet that were just wonderful and kind and powerful and all that sort of thing. We never got there, thank God. The actuality of the relationship was she was in judgment of me every day. She saw me as not enough. She saw, she had the idea and projected at me continuously, you're never going to be enough. You're never going to make enough money. What you do is not valuable. That was the actuality of what I was living, which, is kind of like you look at that and you're like, why would you stay in that? Exactly. Why would any of us stay in that? But that's the story, I think part of it actually is trying to maintain that perfection, because one of the things I've learned is that when you come up with a decision or a judgment or a conclusion about something, nothing that doesn't match that decision, judgment, or conclusion can come into your world. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Got a sign saying, okay, cool. Just making sure. So when you do a decision, judgment, or conclusion, nothing that is different than that, nothing that doesn't match it can come into your world. Well, I had decided I had the perfect woman and I had the perfect career. And the problem is I couldn't see it because of that judgment. I couldn't see when it wasn't actually working. So it created the place where I was in the middle of it and I was getting deeper and deeper into something that wasn't what I actually wanted, but I couldn't see it because I decided it was perfect and she was perfect at the beginning. And basically the same thing with the practice.
I assume that things were working out at first because usually relationships, the beginnings are pretty flawless. And then once it goes toxic, it just becomes this constant chase of how it used to be. And hope that it's going to be back to what it was, but it's just not. And I get exactly what you're talking about. For me, it was a little bit different in that, it was really cool at the beginning, but I wasn't even trying to get back there to try and create a greater future. And what I saw is every future I tried to create, she would slam the door on. And so every time I tried to do something, I realized, the future I want to create, she's not involved in that. She wants it to stay the way it was. I want it to change and get greater all the time. And so even if it would get greater, she would find a way to try to take it back to what it was in the past. And so, there's so many aspects in this discussion on perfection, and you can take this side or that side, but really I think what we need to do is get as many awarenesses around it as possible and see what applies to us, to see what we ourselves can change. Right. So just to kind of conclude this thread, you had a certain life that you made the decision that it is perfect, which blinded you to the reality of it. And then there was sort of like a cognitive dissonance between what you thought it is and how you actually felt about it.
Well, let me, and I would like to wind up this thread too, because I'd like to talk about more fun stuff. But let me just say, as far as the decision about the perfect was, I decided my girlfriend was perfect. Therefore, I didn't see anything that she did that didn't match that point of view. And I decided being a chiropractor was going to be the perfect career rather than asking questions and looking at it. And I got to say, it was a great gift the way it's turned out. It was the right step to make. But given that I had decided it was perfect, I couldn't see how to change it to make it something better. And I couldn't see how it was actually showing up for me.
Got it. Okay. So I'm glad we clarified that. So next would be, so what did you change as you kind of like dug yourself out of that hole? What kind of different mindsets, attitudes, actions have you taken? What realizations and insight you had?
So many things. Well, let me tell you what happened was at this point after I said, university, you have 6 months or I'm ending my life, I saw an ad in the paper for something called Access Consciousness. And, and it said, all of life comes to me with ease and joy and glory. And I was like, oh my God, another metaphysical friggin' thing. Forget this. But I hated it so much, and I learned before that, whether you love something or hate it, there's something in it for you. And I hated it so much that I called this girl just to find out what she did. And she said, well, we do all kinds of things. She said, but a good place to start would be with this thing called the bars. It's 32 points on the head. And when you hold it, at the worst, you feel like you had a good massage. At the best, your whole life will change. And in the back of my head, I'm going, my whole life better change or I'm killing myself. What do I have to lose? And so I had a session of this stuff called Access Consciousness Bars, BARS. And literally from the moment she put her hands on my head, I felt this peace flow through my body. And I was like, whoa, I haven't felt this in years. And then after about 15 minutes, I started giggling like a little kid. And she kept putting her hands in these different positions. And I would giggle more every time she did. I was just like, you know, this perfect stranger doing this thing. I don't even know what it is, right? And I literally got up from that session an hour and 15 minutes later and had a sense of total peace. I had literally gone in depressed and suicidal. And I left peaceful with a sense of possibility for the future and actually happy for the first time in almost 3 years. So I was like, okay, if I can feel this way, I'm in. Now, I got to say, I don't know how other people's changes occur for them. Well, I guess I do. I work with a lot of people around the world, but, you know, I wouldn't say that that happens for anybody else or everybody else or anything, but it was what I needed to get out of that hole that I was stuck in. And one of the things I want to let people know is if you're in a hole, just say, hey, universe, consciousness, whatever it is you believe in, ask for some help and be willing to receive it. And then ask this question, what's it going to take to change this? What else is possible? And then another one, how does it get any better than this? Because it starts to shift the energetics of it. When you ask a question, you stop staying stuck behind the same walls you're stuck in. You start seeing some openings and some doors and windows to crawl through.
Right. Yes. Because it's like once you start asking different questions, then your perception kind of shifts. Then you see the world slightly differently, and all this sort of little things that were there all along. You're no longer blind to them. Is that what you mean? Or
Absolutely.
also all sorts of synchronicities that would be like, you know, fortunate events come your way.
Well, it's like if you've ever had one of those days where you're having a crappy day and you find some way to change it, and all of a sudden, you know, you're having a crappy day and you're driving to work and everybody's driving extra slow. You're in a line and the checker charges you too much, blah, blah, blah. We all know how that is when we're sort of functioning from that space or that contracted area way of being. And then if you change it and you start getting happy, you notice like, oh, everybody's driving faster. Oh, I got more money back at the grocery store. You know, people are doing nice things for me. It's like we have to realize it really is our state, our space that we choose that creates what goes on around us. And asking questions can take you out of anything into something greater, because a question always opens up possibilities. An answer always shuts them down because you're stuck with the answer you give yourself.
Right. Yeah. To be honest, if someone would like to do like an experiment that shows this, it's very in your face, and for me at least, that's the best way to test that. So, you know, when you sometimes go out, I don't know if you're still going out, you know, to like a party and socializing. Maybe socializing is a better example.
Socializing, yes.
Yeah. So you go socializing, and I personally don't drink, and it can be a bit tough to shift the gears to be more social if you've been stuck at home in front of a computer for the whole day. But nevertheless, I'd prefer to do it like that. And some days when I would go out and get stuck in my head, I would do, you know, like every no one would like me as much. Like everything would be really hard. Like there would be no flow to the conversations, and it was all because I didn't like feel good in my body. But some other nights when I felt good in my body and my inner dialogue was also on point, which, you know, the reasons for that that's like a different conversation, but it was like a different person was going out. Like everything was clicking. Everyone was, you know, interested in chatting. So once I realized that this is like almost two people, I stopped taking the nights out personally. I was like, oh, maybe I'm unlikable, or, you know, I didn't feel good about myself, because I know that this actually is a result of my sort of the way I feel internally. and then the world kind of aligns itself with that feeling.
That's exactly that. And I would say that second you know, the one that goes out and people like you and you like them and that sort of thing, that's actually when you're being you. When you're not, you're functioning from all kinds of things that aren't you. And what I've learned from Access Consciousness, the work that I do, is it's friggin' changeable. And it's friggin' easy to change for the most part. It takes some tools. You got to do the work. You know, it doesn't just happen, but you choose it, and then you have some tools that you can use to actually change it. Because why should any of us live like that first person? But most people do so much of their lives. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. And because when you say I'm not being me, it's usually is because I'm not feeling good in the moment, and there's something that I lack. And let's say I wish someone would tell me something nice that would like pick up my mood a little bit. And then because that need comes across in very subtle ways, then people are actually less interested because they feel like I need something from them. So they are less likely to give me a positive feedback. And then it shuts me down even more. And it's like a downward spiral. And this obviously...
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so this is just a microcosm of an example that applies to like going out and socializing, but this can be extrapolated to pretty much any area of your life on a micro and macro scale as well. So that's it.
Totally. And the thing is, if you live your life from that, we call it the second person, the one where you're actually being you, it's amazing how things show up. You know, you talk about synchronicities. Mm-hmm. You know, I like to call it magic and miracles. You know, I like to, everybody's trying to reduce everything into the least magical quantity in this world right now. And I'm like, no, man, it's a friggin' miracle. It's awesome. Enjoy it. Rejoice in it, you know? Mm-hmm. But if you go back to that thing about asking a question, you know, when you said, I'd really like somebody to say something nice to me. Well, ask, hey, what would it take for somebody to say something nice to me? Or one of the ones I love is, hey, universe, show me something beautiful. You know, like it's this question you ask of everything around you to show you something that gets you back to that space that is actually your reality. Because most of us are living from a reality that's not really ours, which is why I start by giving people questions that they can ask, because in any moment you can start changing it. Like that question, how does it get any better than this? If you ask it when you're having a crappy day, it'll start to get better. You ask it when you're having a great day, it'll get even better. You know, so if you ask it when something good happens or when something bad happens, it literally does open up that space for something different to show up. And when you start asking questions, you start getting closer to being you.
Yeah. And by you being you, and we're like kind of getting out of the conversation about perfectionism, but I wanted to quickly touch upon the major tenets of the Access Consciousness philosophy and maybe tie it in with this whole conversation about perfectionism.
Well, so the thing about Access Consciousness is it's basically a set of tools, techniques, and information to allow you to change anything in your life you want to change. Mm-hmm. And we have literally thousands of tools and things that we, offer people, and so many of them are just so simple to use. But it's based on the idea that you actually are an infinite being. I used to hear that when I was doing metaphysics a long time ago. And I'd be like, well, then why can't I pay rent? Why can't I be happy? I was like, wouldn't an infinite being at least be able to pay rent and be happy? And they were like, but you're an infinite being. Just know that. I'm like, thanks a friggin' lot. What does that do for me? Mm-hmm. And so the other thing about Access is it's based on being really practical. It's got to be useful in people's everyday lives, or we don't talk about it.
Right.
And so basically, asking questions is one of the tools. We have a way of really simply going back to the point of creation of wherever you've chosen a limitation and ask it to change. And it usually does, because, it's my awareness or my point of view is that, this universe around us is here to support us. And not really in an airy-fairy way like a lot of people are like, yes, just think good thoughts. I'm like, yeah, what do you do when you want to kill people? Thinking good thoughts doesn't help. Mm-hmm. You need a way to practically change it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And So it's based on the idea that consciousness is within every molecule, and consciousness is that space where everything is included and nothing is judged, and there is no wrongness, and there's no need for rightness either. And as you start to experience that, what happens is you start to feel more of a connection with everybody around you, and you also start to get more of a connection with what is really true for you. And you get to be more that second person that we talked about, living your entire life. And, I think actually what's interesting is, for me, it all ties into the perfectionism conversation, because perfectionism is the primary hammer we use to beat ourselves over the head. It's how we maintain a constant state of judgment of ourselves, as though it has some value, as though if we just judge ourselves enough, we'll become better. I don't know about you, but I've never seen one person judge themselves into getting better. I've seen them choose to become greater, but I've never seen them judge themselves into getting there.
Yeah, well, it's because it seems like it should work, because you're becoming a little bit more like you're whipping yourself for doing bad things, so you'd be more likely to do the good things. Maybe this is actually a result of the way people tend to grow up when they're children and they get punished for bad behaviors, and then they internally punish themselves, and maybe I don't know, just the fear. Yeah.
Well, I that's part of it, and once again, though, I think, we can't really reduce it down to just one thing, but I'd say that's a huge part of it. But if you look at the reality we live in, we live in a very judged society and world, and it doesn't matter what culture. You've traveled, I've traveled, we both traveled a lot, and we know this exists in every culture on the planet. And so, and yet there's one country I can think of, which is Bhutan, that is, they actually have a happiness, what is that called? A person in charge of happiness. The only country I know of that is even interested in anything like that. But if you go there, the people have a level of peace, they have a level of joy, they have a level of contributing to each other. It just doesn't seem to exist in most places in the world. We can choose it, but we have to realize when we're swimming in the muck of this world we live in, and when we're actually being us. And I'd say when you're being you, it's like being that second person. You're cool. Like, there's nothing up, nothing wrong. You're happy to see people, happy for them not to be seen, whatever. It's just, it's all good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just that space that you enter. And for years of my life, I was sometimes entering that space, and I felt amazing. Everything was clicking. And some other times I would be just out of it. And I didn't know how to get into that space consistently. It just seemed such a random occurrence. And I was at the time when I was not aware of meditation or all sorts of different tools that help you to be more in alignment with yourself, aka the universe, more consistently. And if you just let the mainstream society tell you what the world is and how we're supposed to understand it, it is very easy. There is no teachings in this kind of mainstream about, the self-awareness, how your mind works, and the all the judgments that happen even without you knowing that they are happening. They're just like constantly occurring, and you're like at the effect of those thoughts. So without you realizing that those things actually are occurring, there's no way to change it. So, yeah.
So true. I mean, for me, that's why we created Access Consciousness. I look around and I go, I don't know how people live without these tools. I see them struggling, and, I'll say something, I'll ask them a question, and one question, sometimes their eyes open, and they look at me really wide, and they're like, oh my God, I never thought of that. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, cool. Well, that's in the beginning access class. That would have been one of the first questions you would have gotten. And they're like, really? And I'm not, and I don't mean it as like a something where I think everybody in the world has to do this. It's like, if simple tools are available wherever they come from, I don't care where they come from. Like you mentioned meditation, whatever it is for you that you're drawn to, that seems like it might create a change friggin' do it, man. At least try it out. What do you have to lose? If you didn't have to be, here's a question for everybody that they can ask themselves. If I didn't have to be perfect, what could I choose?
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't have to do this perfectly, what would I choose?
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's do like a practical example. So, I feel like perfectionism and just to tie it in with like all the themes all together. So the perfectionism, it seems like it's a good idea because you're trying to do things really well. But because you're trying to do things really well, then you are actually a lot of times less likely to take action because you know that when you do it, it's not going to come out as good as it is in your head. And for me, my tool to deal with that is just when I see myself being like, okay, this has to be like this and like this and I live like this, and I become like so unrealistic about the outcome. Because if I actually wanted to do it in such a perfect manner, it would take forever, and it would just prevent me from taking action in the first place. So for me, it's just like, I just want to get it out. Let's say that I'm producing a piece of content or something. Just want to get it out, and it's good enough. If it's good enough, then it's good enough. Otherwise, it would take me months to just do anything because I really want it to be really good. And then the second realization is that if you put it out there and then you do another kind of, then the second piece of content is going to be better because you learn certain lessons, you learn certain ways of going about it that make it better, but without sacrificing so much time as well in the first place. So just, it's just about putting it out there without judging yourself too harshly and understanding that as new iterations of whatever it is that you're doing are going to happen, they're going to get better organically anyway. If you like,
absolutely. And what is that saying? What is it? It's like if you do 80%, it's like if it's 80% good, it will. I don't remember. Darn. I had a great perfectionism awareness there for a moment, and then it wasn't perfect enough, so it went away. But I mean, it's like with the books that I've written, it's like the first, not the first, but it was probably the 10th book I'd written, but I was taking a different tact on that, and I really wanted to make it quote unquote perfect. Mm-hmm. And I worked on it for probably 11 months back and forth, with my, business manager, communications coordinator, editing it back and forth. And finally, my business partner, Gary, the guy that founded Access, he said, stop, let the book go out into the world. And I was like, but it's not perfect. He said, how perfect is it? I said, it's probably about 90% right now. He said, that's 10% more than you need. Get it out into the world. Nobody's going to notice. And I was like, and he's like, trust me on this one. And it made me lighter. One of the other really simple tools of Access is what's true makes you lighter. A lie makes you heavier. And when he said, put it out there, get it out there now, I went, okay. And it made me lighter. And I realized I was doing this perfectionism thing that I had done my whole life. And I was like, okay, I am not going to stop this with that perfectionism thing. So I published it in 2001. And the feedback that I have gotten on that book, I mean, literally hundreds upon hundreds of emails of people saying literally it saved their life or changed their life so dynamically that without it, they don't know where they would be. And I was like, wow. And had I waited, the book probably still wouldn't be out. And that was back in 2011. And it really showed me, you know what? If it's 80% as good as what you can do, let it go because it wants to go do something and create something in the world. And so I started following that. And the last book, the Return of the Gentleman book, is one that we did in about 3 months because we got creative in creating it. But it was not 100%. There were lots of things I wanted to add. And I went, no, people need this now. Go for it. And so that one took 3 months. The other one took over a year.
Yeah, that's what it is, right? And there's another example that comes to my mind, how perfectionism can be quite destructive. So in the gaming industry, there's quite a few titles of sequels of games that used to sell really well. It doesn't matter what the title is, but just as an example, how it ruined them. So the first part one of the game really well. So all of a sudden they're like, okay, this is the golden goose. We really want to make the second one even better, so it exceeds all the expectations. They had massive funds for it, a lot of motivation. So they just started working on it, and then year after year they continuously would postpone the premiere of the game because it was not good enough. And then like first it was like a year, then another year. I think it was like 10 years. And eventually, as they were working on it, they ran out of funds and they never put it out.
Wow. Wow.
So
there you go.
Yeah, I know, right? And also what I feel is happening as well in those examples is getting stuck in your like own echo chamber of your own mind, because you're judging it just based on your own you're the only reference point sometimes. Let's say, I guess you can ask for feedback, but in a lot of cases people just think, oh, this is not good enough, I need to make it better and better. But you may be doing it better based on what you think it should be better, not what people would actually benefit from. So it's a different thing to, let's say they're perfecting this game, but they would never get it out there and get some feedback from people. So they would be working on parts of it that are not even relevant or not as important to the people who will be playing those games.
Yeah.
Can you see the distinction?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is that thing. And you can see in that, anytime you're doing judgment, you're limiting your creation. You're limiting your joy, and you're limiting the lightness in your life. And perfection, once again, it's like the ultimate series of judgments, and it's the ultimate standard that you can never achieve. And what we have to do is realize perfection is something that was put on us by, everybody when we were growing up, as though, and for the people that are listening to this podcast, I used to let people know there were sort of almost like two different species on the planet. And, but let's put it this way. There are a lot of people in the world that have a fixed mindset. No matter what you do, they will never change their mind. They will let you know that you're wrong and they're right. And then there are people with a growth mindset, which I like to call the humanoids of the world. And they're the ones who always think they're wrong because they don't fit in. They don't know how to do this reality right. They feel like they're the weirdest people on the planet and nobody ever gets them. So they're always feeling wrong. But they're the most creative people on the planet. Anybody who's truly creative is one of these people. And so what happens is they grow up already feeling wrong. So as a way of trying to overcome that, they go into a constant state of judgment of themselves to try to get to the place where they don't feel wrong anymore. And what we have to recognize, if you've been feeling wrong your whole life, you are a humanoid. You are one of those with a growth mindset. You are one of the creatives on the planet that can truly create something different. And the place you get stuck is when you try to create from the rules of this reality as it currently is. You're not here to suffer this reality and live it. You're here to create a different reality. Reality that actually involves possibilities beyond judgment.
Right. And why do you think this whole... Why do you think the judgments even occur in the first place? Like, what was the... There must be some sort of like reason for people to be judging certain things that maybe was at first good, but then kind of when it gets out of whack, it becomes extremely limiting. Is there?
Well, there's two answers I could give you to that question. One is way beyond the scope of a podcast. So let me give you the other answer, which is it's endemic in our reality. It's been done as long as there have been people on this planet, as though that was somehow the way we had to be, and as though that was the way to choose and know the effect of your choice, whether it was a good choice, a bad choice, a right choice, or a wrong choice. And yet, if you were to talk to somebody who is truly enlightened, for example, should you ever be able to find one, you would tell them about the most terrible thing that you have done that was so wrong, and they would say, "My child, was it truly wrong, or did it bring you to more awareness?" And you go, "Holy shit, it brought me more awareness. And if I don't look at it as wrong, then I can receive the gift of that awareness and be grateful for it." And so, and we have this idea that knowing right versus wrong is somehow going to make it so that we don't go out and do mass murders and that sort of thing.
Right.
But the people that do mass murders, they don't have a sense of right and wrong. They have no sense of any connection to anything. They're just, speaking of that party, I think it came to you. I think that party is, in your living room, just by the sound of it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's more and more people around, so.
I think it's good. I think, given that we're doing a podcast on perfectionism, I think it's highly appropriate.
Yeah.
So back to that, if we have this idea that right and wrong is somehow going to steer us toward good and not bad. But if that really worked, our society would look completely different, and we would not have, mass shootings on the rise and bombings and terrorist attacks. We got to realize this shit does not work the way it is. And we've got to do something different and actually rise above it. And from my point of view, rising above it is where judgment and perfection is no longer what you strive.
Trying to make the best choice.
By the perfection. And I see one of the other biggest areas people do it is in their relationships. They won't say what's up for them because they still want to be seen as perfect by their partner, or they want to let their partner know that they see them as perfect because it's a condition of their relationship. I think it's one of the reasons most relationships stay at a surface level, and then people end up breaking up because you can't maintain that standard indefinitely. And so, if we had some leeway, if we didn't have to see our partners as perfect, if we didn't have to see ourselves as perfect, and if we didn't uphold ourselves to that standard of judgment, what possibilities could be created in relationship? And I've got to say, it's like, as I've learned this more and more, and I've interacted with people, and I've had many relationships and friendships along the way, it's like when I would say something to my partner where I was like, "Hey, I've got this going on, and let's talk about it so I can get your perspective on it," or "You said this and I got to this place with it. Tell me what was going on for you?" It's like afterwards, almost every time they've said to me, "God, it is so refreshing to not have to be perfect. It's so refreshing to be with somebody who will just talk to me about what's going on so we can change it, so we don't have to we don't have to hide from this elephant that's in the room that we both know is there, but neither one of us will talk about it." And it's changed my relationships dynamically, and also so many of the people that I've worked with.
Yeah. It's actually like almost, it is being perfect with in its imperfection. The imperfections is what makes it perfect.
Yeah. And you allow it to be there.
And it's being comfortable, and then in the same time working on it, like working on those areas that need improvement, but not feeling bad about them in the same.
Yeah, and that's what allows you the freedom to work on those areas. Because if you have to have this standard of perfection, or if your partner does, whether it's business, whether it's an intimate relationship or what have you, it's like not having that standard of perfection is what actually allows you to work on the things that don't work so they can actually get greater. Because, and this, relationship is such a perfect example, if you will, of perfectionism gone awry, because we have this idea that we want to find the perfect person. And then when they do anything that's not perfect, we either have to cut it out of our awareness or we have to leave them because you're not perfect. Well, but what I found is when I talk to people about those things where I had these reference points and these standards for what they should do, and I would talk to them really vulnerably about it, I'd go, "Hey, I thought, this, and you did this," and they would go, "Oh, well, here's what it was for me." And I go, "Oh my God, I totally see why they did that from their point of view." And it took all the charge off of it, and those walls that were building up between us just went away. And then they had the freedom to do it. And once again, I'm not saying you go here and you're like, "Oh, you're wrong for doing this." Instead, you stay the question. You don't come at them with the idea that they're wrong for not being your version of perfect. And it breaks down those walls that most people have that start to build up between them, which is why their relationship ends.
Yeah. I can totally relate. Now, like, I have all those memories coming back of relationships. The weirdest thing happens sometimes when I had some girlfriends in the past, and the level of awareness I had at that time was much lower. So I found that we would get stuck in this kind of old routines, and things that used to be fun and enjoyable were not anymore, but we kind of got attached to the way of being in a certain way, and the conversations would kind of dry up, and this authenticity and fun and playfulness would be sucked out of that relationship. And that would also be a result of all sorts of different resentments that were building up. That small things, but just there's a lot of them. It's like an army of ants. Like one ant can't
with
really
razor
hurt.
blades.
Yeah, like one ant can't really hurt you, but if you have an entire army of them, then it's something to be scared of. So and then we break up, and then sort of once the breakup happened, a lot of those like energies that were those negative energies that were built up, they were kind of like broken, and then all of a sudden I was free to express myself in the same way that I was prior to that. So I'm sure there's a better way to deal with that rather than breaking up, to clear those energies.
Yes.
But this is definitely one of the ways it works. Maybe part of it is the fact that you start to miss the other person, and you all of a sudden put out your best foot forward. But definitely there's some kind of energy clearing happening, and the channels of communications get back to higher definition. So.
Yeah, and you get to be, and this is what people experience after a breakup like that is, so sorry, I've got a fly buzzing around me who really wants to contribute to the conversation, apparently. Distracted for a moment, bright, shiny things. What happens is, so if you look at that, and we have all these standards, we have all these reference points, all these objectives that we're trying to achieve in relationship, and we think this person is the one, which is a wonderfully perfectionist point of view. And then what happens is we can't bring up any of those things because of this perfection. And so what we have to do is we have to, okay, I can't say this, so I'll cut off a part of me here. Oh, I can't do this, I'll cut off a part of me here. I can't say this, I can't do this. And we get to this place where we've cut off so much of us and we're no longer being us. Mm-hmm. Then the relationship breaks up, and then you get to be that second person we were talking about, which really, like I said, from my point of view, is actually you being you. And it's like, wow, I can finally be me again because I don't have to withhold all these parts of me because I'm with this person and it doesn't work for them. And so for me in relationship, what I've endeavored to do is to stop the perfectionism trap, number one. And number two, both on my side and in my expectations of her. And at the same time, when something comes up, it's like, I'll just bring it up and say, hey, will you help me, please? I've got this going on, and can you give me your perspective? Like, what's happening from your side here? And it has created some of the most amazing relationships and friendships that I still have to this day. I might be in a relationship with somebody and we both realize, okay, it doesn't work. I'm, with my travel schedule and my work schedule and my target in life doesn't really lend itself to long-term relationships. And so, I'd get to a point a few months in and we'd both realize it wasn't working because they wanted more or whatever. And I go, cool, you know what? I totally get it. And we would part as friends, and we're still friends to this day. And I think, from my point of view, if we're going to have a relationship, the person we're in a relationship with should be one of our best friends, not our only best friend, because that's equally as messed up because they can't provide everything for you, but one of our very best friends, like somebody where you truly have had, where you've gone through these things together, haven't made each other wrong, have been there for each other to actually create more. And it creates a space where you both really like each other, which is impossible if you're trying to maintain a standard of perfection, because you don't even like yourself. And when you don't like yourself, you can't truly like anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Right. So I think that concludes this topic of perfectionism, and we touched upon a little bit of conscious. So what was the name of the consciousness? Access consciousness.
Access consciousness, yeah.
And gave different examples of how it ties in with different areas of your life. And I hope that's been beneficial to anyone who can relate those to their own life, because those examples, I feel like if anyone is in their 25 or older, it's guaranteed that they had some of those experiences, and this will provide some sort of new set of lenses to look at those situations. So now about your recent creation, that you said that you actually had to be okay with it being less than perfect, and it was perfectly fine that you could you could put it out there, just because you want this to affect people. You don't want this necessarily to be as perfect as it is in your mind, but as long as it's touching people's hearts, minds, it's impacting them in a positive manner, that's good enough. And that is the book.
Yes.
Called The Return of the Gentleman. So what is this book about?
Well, the book came about. I had a 22-year-old friend who we'd been hanging out. I'd known him since he was 16, and so he'd been around me and my business partner Gary quite a bit. And we were talking at lunch one day, and he said, "I just want to thank you." And I was like, "For what?" He said, "What I've learned about being a gentleman," he said, "I've learned from you and also from Gary." And I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, the way you are in the world has changed my life." I was like, "Really?" I mean, I was gobsmacked, and I was doing stunned mullet, looking at him with my jaw dropped, And I said, "Okay, tell me more, please." He said, "I have searched for years online how to be a good man, and all I could find, which is one of the reasons I'm so grateful you're doing this podcast and everything associated with it, because what he said was, all I could find was how to get women in bed and how to pretend you are something you're not so people will like you and be attracted to you." He's like, and this kid can do internet searches. He can friggin' find anything. So if it was out there, I knew he could find it. And I went, oh my God, we need to have a different conversation here about what it is to actually be a man. And what he went on to say, he said, look, he said, you're one of the kindest people that I know. He's like, you're kind to men, you're kind to women. He said, you have sex, and yet the women that you have sex with are grateful for it, and they enjoy it, and they enjoy you after, and you have a friendship after. He said, you have this level of respect that I've never seen. He said, and you dress the way I've wanted to dress, but I always was made wrong for it. And people would tell me that, I was gay. He grew up in this place in Scotland and then in England. He said, and the way you dress, he's like, it has this level of elegance to it and a style to it that's yours, but it doesn't invalidate other people. It's like, he said, the way, and I was like, holy shit, what? Because for me, I was just being me. And when he said this, I went, we need to have a different conversation so the men in the world know that they can actually be everything. In other words, because what we have, we're handed these male stereotypes about you have to be macho, you have to be strong. If you show any emotional sensitivity, you're weak or you're gay. And by the way, this conversation applies to gay men too. It also is very, very, very helpful for women also to know not only what men are going through, but also to invite them to be the greatness they can be. But so what we started this conversation about, and I did a series of 4 Zooms with some gentlemen, and what it was about was recognizing that you can be this strength that men are and have the capacity for. You don't have to turn into a sensitive new age guy in order to not be that abusive man that abuses women. The Me Too movement. I'm very grateful for the Me Too movement because it's bringing things out of the closet. And at the same time, we live in a world now where, men just think they're wrong. It's like that old philosophical question. If a tree falls in the forest and no one is around, is the man still wrong? And as men, we know the answer is yes, And so what the book is about is it's both for men and women, gay or straight or anywhere along the spectrum. But what it's about is actually recognizing that you can be everything you are. You can be strong, you can be sensitive, you can be creative, you can, have your mate's back in a fight and still stand up for women's rights. And they don't have to be exclusive. And this idea that they do have to be is something that we've learned from the world around us from the time we were little boys, and the idea that other men are competition for us. No, I worked with thousands of men around the world, and one of the things that they desire more than anything else is nurturing connections with other men. Of course, they desire relationship. Of course, they desire sex, but they technically desire nurturing connections with other men, and they haven't allowed themselves to have them because they have the idea that other men are competition. So these are some of the things that are addressed in the book. But what I like about it is it's not just a conversation where you go away going, oh, well, that was thoughtful. In the book, we use the Access Consciousness tools, some of them at least, to literally change things while you're reading. So it'll bring something up and then you go, whoa. And then I go, okay, cool. Well, you let that go now. And if you're willing to let it go, you read the next 2 sentences and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, that's lightening up for me. And I've had so many men, and this book hasn't been out that long, but I've had so many men send me emails saying, thank you so much. I feel like I can actually be me now. And I've had so many women who have either read, there are 2 things. One is women who've read the book and said, thank you so much. I now know what my husband is going through. I know what my boyfriend is going through. I now understand what men are facing. And I now also realize that it's possible for me to be everything I am and supporting them. And then I've also had women who said, thank you so much. My husband has read this book and I now have the man back that I married. And I'm like, that is friggin' awesome. So that's what it's about. That's where it's coming from. But it's about actually creating change, giving different perspectives, definitely, but also creating the change that those different perspectives allow.
Right. Okay. So it's basically about coming back to your masculine essence, which is devoid of all sorts of like templates or ways that the society is trying to push on us of what it's supposed to be a man. It's rather about answering that question and having given the answer externally. It's more about finding the answer within what it is to be a man for you.
Yeah, it truly is what it is to be a man for you. And, I always sort of get a little in my world when people talk about masculine or masculinity as though it's supposedly separate from femininity. For me, it's like we should have it all. We should be able to embrace our masculine characteristics and our feminine characteristics and know that we're not wrong and know that there's no, super male out there. We have this idea that there's one way we're all supposed to be, but we're all different. I mean, every single one of us is different. And what it does, it seeks to give you that place where you can get out of the judgment of the difference, but also truly change the ways that you've been functioning and trying to make yourself the perfect man here. It's actually great for this conversation because it's we as men try to do so much to be perfect, especially when we're those humanoids, those growth mindset men. And let's face it, it's only the growth mindset men that are going to be listening to this podcast, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, especially when we're wired that way, it's like we've got such a high standard of perfection of ourselves. And this starts to break that down by recognizing there is no perfect man, but also here's a lot of questions I'm going to ask you and give you that you can use in your life. But also here's a lot of ways of changing this stuff so that really what it's about for me is you liking the man that looks back at you in the mirror every morning.
Right. And I guess just a question that one may have when they're thinking about like fully accepting yourself as you are without judgment. Because I feel like a lot of people, why they do judge themselves is because it maintains the level of motivation to keep striving to be better. But it's not about completely like, okay, so now I am great as I am, so I can just like sit at home and watch Netflix all day, right?
Exactly.
So
No,
what's
it
the
is
alternative,
definitely not.
like motivation? If it's not
Well,
coming from like scarcity and negativity, what is
I
the
know, but
alternative? Mm-hmm.
that is, I love that question, because that's exactly the problem, is we keep functioning from motivation. It's like, I need this motivation in order to choose this. Well, what if you don't? What if it's just a choice? To get up off the couch watching Netflix it's a choice. And this is what starts to become available for men and women who read this book, is choice. Like, how would I like to show up in the world? And rather than, oh, I can't, or I need to do this in order to do that, it's, how would I like to show up in the world? What are some choices I can make that will start creating that? It sounds simple, and yet it is a totally different paradigm, but it's really easy to embrace, because it's all based on the idea of what you would choose if you were truly being you.
So you're saying
there.
that basically, if you are aligning yourself with that second person, or aligning yourself with the what are we aligning ourselves with the universe, with the like the higher consciousness, the God?
Well, if you, I mean, on some level you could go there, any of those. And also, what I would say is, rather than aligning yourself, you're actually being you. And because we try to align, which means we try to be certain things that we can align with, except there's something beyond that, which is where we don't have to align, and we don't have to agree, we don't have to resist, we don't have to react. We just get to be, unapologetically be. And it's like, here I am, warts and all. And you may like what I have, you may not. I'm doing my best to change the shit that doesn't work, and I'm not perfect, and I'm not trying to be, but I'm really cool, and you want to hang out. Yep.
Right. Yeah. It's a difficult thing to talk about as well, because it's like certain words are limiting the scope of the conversation. So what I mean, align yourself with this or that, it's I instantly realize that there's such a paradox. It's my mind is being fried right now.
Oh, good. And I'm doing my job.
Right. So I guess we'll. Is there anything you would like to leave the listeners with? Any questions that they may ask themselves, or a call to action, or anything like that?
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to give one call to action, and that is actually a gift on my part, which is, I've got something like 300 videos on YouTube that are simple tools, different things that you can use to change situations. Please go there and use them. They're my gift to you. And once again, I've had people tell me, I've watched your YouTube videos and I changed this and this and this, and I would love everybody to have that gift. And once again, you don't have to sign up for anything. Just go there and watch the friggin' videos and get some friggin' change. It's my attempt to pay forward the gift that these tools and this, this body of work has been in my life. And then as far as questions, there's three things basically. One is, start asking, how does it get any better than this? For every time something bad happens, every time something good happens, just make it a question that occurs pretty much after everything, and start to notice how things start to open up in your life. The other thing is, what else is possible here? And what's it going to take to change this? And then the other one is, if I were truly creating my life today, what would I choose right away? And just asking those, you don't even have to look for an answer to any of those questions. Just ask. Maybe ask it a few times, and then just leave it and see what shows up. And see, and this, once again, this is one of about 8,000 tools that we have in Access Consciousness, but it is a beginning of starting to open up some possibilities in your life rather than feeling like you're stuck. And use it. Let me know what happens. Let me know what changes.
Right.
And and I also want to say, I'm not one of those people, like you said, like, I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, just ask these questions and everything will be perfect. No, I'm telling you at the outset, this is the very beginning of a very, it's a very beginning of opening up different possibilities for you. And if you want to explore more, you'll find the ways to explore more. But and I'm also not one of these people that's like, if you just sit here and think happy thoughts and you don't have to do any work, you just have to, sit and think happy thoughts. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's a way of starting to change things so that things are changeable. And once things are changeable, then things become exciting again and living becomes fun again. And that's what I would like everybody to have.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So once you kind of get a little taste of what's possible, then you're more likely to explore and discover it further. All right. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it made sense. And I know from personal experience that just watching and being exposed to this information doesn't really do you much good until you take some kind of actionable steps. And what I would encourage you to do is to, when you find yourself trying to make things amazing or perfect, see if you can just put it out there. Instead of obsessing over every single detail, just put it out there and see what happens. You're going to get feedback from that. And this obviously applies to people who are obsessive about things. If you're a slacker and you don't have those tendencies, then don't listen to me. But if you find yourself not putting things out there and taking action because you're always stuck in your head, the very first thing you want to do is to just do a 80% good of a job. Don't try to make it 100%. 80% is good enough, and then put it out there. That's my advice to you. That's my advice to me. And I'll see you on the next episode. Peace.